Welcome to another live stream tonight after last night's live stream. So actually tonight we're going to do the autumn statement. I've got it on my on the side here. So we're just going to follow it live stream. I've done this before over the last couple of years, which has been quite interesting. So we'll see how that turns out. But basically, yeah, look, I'm just going to give my opinion on stuff, and yeah, just see how we come out. So hopefully it all turns out good and wonderful. I doubt that's going to be the case. I think I'm in two minds of this. I'm just going to shut these guys up, the BBC that are speaking right now. So we're just going to be following along with the BBC. They've obviously gone there. They've arrived now, so that's quite good. So what I'll do is I'll chuck me so you can watch on the website as well. Bit of fun and games. So, yeah, so what am I expecting today? Look, I think everybody is talking about how we've got this 52 or 54 or whatever it is, £56 billion gap. How are we going to get that sorted? I've got the two issues with this is we did austerity for about 10 years. It didn't work. It totally screwed every aspect of society. It ruined society. And my challenge with that is that we're talking about going back into that now, because that funding gap has to either be done through borrowings, or it has to be done through higher taxes or less government spending. And the problem is, I think, adding tax at a time now when inflation is so bad, that really is going to be damaging. And certainly as a politician, you don't want to stand up to the vote next time. So I think that's going to be a real issue now. And it's one that I think we're going to really start to see take its toll on people. And really for the Conservatives, they've got a big job ahead of them because really they're going to have to take its toll and whatever they do, so they're going to have to. So I'm just checking it to make sure the live stream's on my YouTube channel, which it is, and also on our website at gladfish.com/dashboard. So it's all coming through now, which is good. But yeah, I think the issue really is what are they going to do? And I think it's all great to talk about it right now. I think, the rich have got to pay more. They're saying, the poor, most people, middle class, poor, even, in fact, most people don't necessarily have these huge wads of cash sitting around. I've seen how rents have gone up, and it's actually pretty distressing seeing, the rents go up so much that you got to go and sit there and you say, well, actually, the landlord's now losing money every month. So they have to get that rental increase. And the only way they can get that rental increase is by increasing the rent, which means that tenant now might have to pay 10 or 15% more because it's gone up so quickly. And if they don't have the money to do that, well, they're going to have to move, and that's unfortunate. That goes against everything. And so this is a really insidious time right now with the inflation and with interest rates and with even things like the rental reform bill and all those sort of things for this. It's extremely hard. Now, I see they're just going across. So what I'll do is I'll turn on the speaker.
Of unprecedented global headwinds.
I'll just give
families, pensioners, businesses, teachers, nurses, and many others are worried about the future.
100% agree with that.
So today we deliver a plan to tackle the cost of living crisis and rebuild our economy. Our priorities are stability, growth, and public services.
I think there's lots of words.
We also protect the vulnerable. Because to be British is to be compassionate, and this is a compassionate Conservative government.
The most unruly bunch of idiots.
We are not alone in facing these problems, but today we respond to an international crisis with British values. We are honest about the challenges, and we are fair in our solutions. Yes, we take difficult decisions to tackle inflation and keep mortgage rates down.
When it doesn't apply.
But our plan also leads to a shallower downturn, lower energy bills, higher growth, and a stronger NHS and education system. Three priorities then today.
Here we go.
Stability, growth, and public services. I start with stability. Mr. Speaker, high inflation is the enemy of stability. It means higher mortgage rates, more expensive food and fuel bills, businesses failing and unemployment rising. It erodes savings, causes industrial unrest and cuts funding for public services.
We can go the other way.
It hurts the
And
poorest
that's
the
my
most
fear now.
and eats away at the trust upon which a strong society is built. The Office for Budget Responsibility confirms global factors are the primary cause of current inflation.
In other words, it's not their fault.
Most countries are still dealing with the fallout from a once-in-a-century pandemic. The furlough scheme, the vaccine rollout and the response of the NHS did our country proud, but they all have to be paid for. The lasting impact on supply chains has made goods more expensive and fuelled inflation, and this has been worsened by a made-in-Russia energy crisis.
Made in Russia, of course. Russia's fault.
Putin's war in Ukraine has caused wholesale gas and electricity prices to rise to 8 times their historic average.
It's a scapegoat.
Inflation is high here, but higher in Germany, the Netherlands and Italy.
There's worse off.
Interest rates have risen here, but faster in the US, Canada and New Zealand. Growth forecasts have fallen here, but fallen further in Germany. The International Monetary Fund expects 1/3 of the world's economy to be in recession this year or next. So the Bank of England, which has done an outstanding job since its independence, now has my wholehearted support in its mission to defeat inflation. And I today confirm we will not change its remit.
Guys, if you've got any questions, type them into the
But we
thing. They
need
should come
fiscal
through to me,
and monetary
and I can
policy
answer
to
whatever
work
question
together.
you've got. Okay.
And that means the government
feel free.
and the bank working in lockstep. It means, in particular, giving the world confidence in our ability to pay our debts. British families make sacrifices every day to live within their means, and so too must their government, because the United Kingdom will always pay its way.
How much really do they?
I understand the motivation of my predecessor's mini-budget, and he was correct.
They're thinking more about themselves
to identify growth as a priority. But unfunded tax cuts are as risky as unfunded spending, which is why we reversed the plan.
How often are they actually spending time
as a result,
sitting down with the constituents,
government
finding out what they want? Most of these guys aren't really
and
getting
the OBR
involved
says
with
today
that.
that the lower interest rates generated
A lot
by
of
the government's
they've
actions
become a
are
class unto
already
themselves,
benefiting
and
our
that
economy
class is
and
governed
public
by
finances.
the wealthy billionaire class.
But, Mr. Speaker, credibility cannot be taken for granted. And yesterday's
sounds pretty bad. I just don't have
we
that
must
respect
continue a relentless fight to bring it down, including a rock-solid commitment to rebuild.
This is all the preamble now, which is just
Richard Hughes
big
and his
words.
team at the OBR today lay out starkly the impact of global headwinds on the UK economy, and I'm enormously grateful to him and his team for their thorough work. The OBR forecast the UK's inflation rate to be 9.1% this year and 7.4% next year.
So 9.1 this year.
They confirm that our actions today help inflation to fall sharply from the middle of next year.
Middle of next year inflation.
They also judge that the UK, like other countries, is now in recession.
I kind of agree with that.
Overall this year, the economy is still forecast to grow by 4.2%. GDP then falls in 2023 by 1.4%, before rising by 1.3%, 2.6% and 2.7% in the following 3 years.
Okay.
The OBR says higher energy prices explain the
majority
majority
1 year
of the downward
of
revision
downturn.
in cumulative growth.
So no depression.
They also expect a rise in unemployment from 3.6% today to 4.9% in 2024, before falling to 4.1%. Today's decisions mean that over the next 5 years, borrowing is more than halved. This year we're forecast to borrow 7.1% of GDP, or £177 billion. Next year 5.5% of GDP, or £140 billion. Then by 2027-28 it falls to 2.4% of GDP.
So you go into a recession and they're cutting spending.
As a result, underlying debt as a percentage of GDP
because you want to stimulate out of recession. You should be saving up in the good years, spending in the bad years, not doing the opposite. But this could get us, this is real deflationary territory.
I also confirm two new fiscal rules.
You've got to really stay on
top. The first is that underlying debt must fall as a percentage of GDP by the 5th year of a rolling 5-year period.
Yeah.
The second, that public sector borrowing over the same period must be below 3% of GDP.
Gotcha.
And the plan I'm announcing today meets both rules.
Of course it would. But will
Today's
they actually do
statement
it?
delivers a consolidation of £55 billion and means inflation and interest rates end up significantly lower. We achieve this, Mr. Speaker, in a balanced way.
A balance.
In the short term,
Watch this.
as growth slows and unemployment rises, we will use fiscal
Next
policy
year, that
to
is the
support
challenge,
the economy. The OBR confirm that because of our plans, the recession is shallower and inflation is reduced. Unemployment is also lower, with about 70,000 jobs saved as a result of our decisions today. Then, once growth returns, we increase the pace of consolidation to get debt falling. This further reduces the pressure on the bank to raise interest rates, because as Conservatives, we do not leave our debts to the next generation.
Not about growth. So,
Mr. Speaker.
hopefully it's talking about stability right now.
So, Mr. Speaker, this is a balanced path to stability.
Balanced path.
Tackling inflation to reduce the cost of living and protect pensioner savings whilst supporting the economy on a path to growth. But it means taking difficult decisions.
This is going to be interesting.
Anyone who says
How
there
are
are
they funding
easy
this
answers
55
is not being straight with the British people.
That's going to be the
Some argue for spending cuts, but that would not be compatible with high-quality public services. Others say savings should be found by increasing taxes. Conservatives know that high-tax economies damage enterprise and erode freedom. We want low taxes and sound money, but Conservatives know sound money has to come first, because inflation eats away at the pound in people's pockets even more insidiously than taxes. So with just under half of the £55 billion consolidation coming from tax and just over half from spending, this is a balanced plan for stability.
So there's about 27.
I turn first to our decisions on tax. I have tried to be fair by following two broad principles. Firstly, we ask those with more to contribute more. And secondly, we avoid the tax rises that damage growth. Although my decisions today do lead to a substantial tax increase, we have not raised headline rates of taxation, and tax as a percentage of GDP will increase by just 1% over the next 5 years. I start with personal taxes. Asking more from those who have more means that the first difficult decision I take on tax is to reduce the threshold at which the 45p rate becomes payable from £150,000 to £125,140. Those earning £150,000 or more will pay just over £1,200 more in tax every year.
So that's,
we're also taking difficult decisions on tax-free allowances. I'm maintaining at current levels the income tax personal allowance, higher rate threshold, main national insurance thresholds and the inheritance tax thresholds for a further 2 years, taking us to April 2028.
So
even after that, we'll still have the most generous set of tax-free allowances of any G7 country.
So that increase for property investment.
I'm also reforming allowances on unearned income. The dividend allowance will be cut from £2,000 to £1,000 next year and then to £500 from April 24. The annual exempt amount for capital gains tax will be cut from £12,300 to £6,000 next year and then £3,000 from April 24. These changes still leave us with more generous allowances than countries like Germany,
tax-free
Ireland, France
allowance
and Canada.
Dropping, you're going to pay more tax.
Because the OBR forecast half of all new vehicles will be electric by 2025, to make our motoring tax system fairer, I've decided that from then, electric vehicles will no longer be exempt from vehicle excise duty. Company car tax rates will remain lower for electric vehicles, and I've listened to industry bodies and will limit rate increases to 1 percentage point a year for 3 years from 2025.
So yes.
The OBR expects housing activity to slow over the next 2 years. So the stamp duty cuts announced in the mini-budget will remain in place, but only until the 31st of March 2025. After that, I will sunset the measure, creating an incentive to support the housing market and the jobs associated with it.
That's good
by
news for
boosting
us.
transaction during the period
keep things
the
in house
economy most
prices.
needs it.
They really need to stimulate, build more. That's one of the key things here.
While I've decided to freeze the employer's NICS threshold until April 2028, we will retain the employment allowance at its new higher level of £5,000. This means 40% of all businesses will pay no NICS at all. The VAT threshold is already more than twice as high as the EU and OECD averages. I will maintain it at that level until March 26. My Right Honourable friend, the Prime Minister, successfully negotiated a landmark international tax deal to make sure multinational corporations, including big tech companies, pay the right tax in the countries they operate. I will implement these reforms, making sure the UK gets our fair share.
They actually do.
Alongside further measures to tackle tax avoidance and evasion, this will raise an additional £2.8 billion by 27-28. I've also heard concerning reports of abuse and fraud in R&D tax relief for SMEs. So I've decided today to cut the deduction rate for the SME scheme to 86% and the credit rate to 10%, but increase the tax-free threshold expenditure
is a big one from an income perspective for everybody.
Despite raising revenue, the OBR has confirmed that these measures have no detrimental impact on the level of R&D investment in the economy. Ahead of the next budget, we'll work with industry to understand what further support R&D and SMEs may require.
Look, if you're selling your property, capital gains tax, yes, you're going to pay more.
I have no objection to windfall taxes if they are genuinely about windfall profits caused by unexpected increases in energy prices. But I know the honourable members opposite are getting excited at the talk of windfall taxes. Can I just say that any such tax should be temporary, not deter investment, and recognise the cyclical nature of energy businesses. So, taking account of this, I've decided that from January the 1st until March 28, we will increase the energy profits levy from 25 to 35%. The structure of our energy market also creates windfall profits for low-carbon electricity generation. So from January the 1st, we've decided to introduce a new temporary 45% levy on electricity generators. Together, these measures raise £14 billion next year.
The problem with that is that that's going to go against...
Finally, I turn to business rates. It's an important principle that bills should accurately reflect market values. So we'll proceed with the revaluation of business properties from April 23. But I will soften the blow on businesses with a nearly £14 billion tax cut over the next 5 years. Nearly two-thirds of properties will not pay a penny more next year, and thousands of pubs, restaurants and small high street shops will benefit. This will include a new government-funded transitional relief scheme, as called for by the CBI, the British Retail Consortium, the Federation of Small Businesses and others,
far, there's
benefiting
not a lot.
around 700,000 businesses. Mr. Speaker, our plan for the cost of living delivers lower inflation, lower mortgage rates, a shallower downturn and lower unemployment.
Not sure
but
about
it also involves public spending discipline. So I turn next to how we protect public services through a challenging period.
Going to be interesting.
The Prime Minister's vision for this country has at its heart a strong NHS and world-class education. We know that a strong economy depends on strong public services, so we will protect them as much as we can as we deliver our plan for stability and growth.
Not a big...
We do have to take difficult decisions on public finances.
Well, they're talking about public
services. So we're going to grow public spending, but we're going to grow it more slowly than the growth in the economy.
Boring time, actually.
For the remaining 2 years of the spending review, we'll protect the increases in department already set out in cash terms, and then grow resource spending at 1% a year in real terms in the 3 years that follow. Although departments will have to make
If you think about it,
efficiencies to deal with
inflation
inflationary
is
pressures in the next 2 years,
7.5,
this decision
they're
means
capping at
overall
1%.
spending in public
That is
services
actually
will continue to
decreasing
rise
spending.
in real terms for the next 5 years. Before I turn to our plan for schools and the NHS, I start with 2 other areas of spending.
Interesting.
The Department for Work and Pensions has a critical role in supporting people into work, and I am proud to live in a country with one of the most comprehensive safety nets anywhere in the world.
What are they going to do here?
But I am also concerned that we've seen a sharp increase in economically inactive working-age adults of around 630,000 people since the start of the pandemic.
Yep.
Employment levels have yet to return to pre-pandemic levels, which is bad for businesses who cannot fill vacancies,
Maybe
bad
we
for
shouldn't have
people
frightened
missing
all
out on the
the people going
opportunity
through
to do
Brexit.
well for themselves and their families. So the Prime Minister's
really
asked
paying
the Work and Pensions
price for
Secretary to do a thorough review of issues holding back workforce participation to conclude early in the new year.
Yeah. Interesting, this whole quiet
Alongside this,
concept.
I am also committed to helping people already in work to raise their incomes, progress in work, and become financially independent.
I think
so we
now
will
is
ask over
a
600,000 more
lose their
people
jobs,
on
but
universal
also
credit to meet with
prices-
a work coach
prices
so
go
that they
up,
can get the
wages are
support
also-
they need
The good
to
thing about
increase
that,
their
when it all
hours
fixes up
or
over
earnings.
a year, 18 months maybe.
I also
maybe
decided
this
to
thing
move
by the
back
end
the
of next
managed
year, I don't know.
transition of people
We'll
from
see.
employment and
Now, it's
support
normally a
allowance onto
2-year
universal
recession,
credit to
and I think that's where it's
2028,
heading to be
and will
now.
invest an extra
We're already,
£280
I
million
think we're already in the
in
recession
DWP
right now.
to crack
We've
down
already
on
got
benefit
months,
fraud and error
another
over the
year,
next 2 years.
so we're into
The government's
2004,
review of the state
halfway
pension
through,
age will
coming
also
out.
be
But
published in
remember,
early
that's when we start getting back
2022.
into normality.
Our
And
security
when we
at
come out of a
home
recession,
depends on our
look,
security
property prices
overseas.
go. So
So I turn
that's
next
good
to
news.
defence and other international commitments.
So look,
The privilege of
not
being
interesting.
this country's Foreign Secretary showed me firsthand the enormous respect in which this country is held, because the United Kingdom is and has always been a force for good in the world.
You might argue that,
Nothing
but yeah.
sums that up more than the courage of our armed forces, men and women who risk their lives every day in defence of our
do
territory
with
and
the
our
armed
belief in freedom. Alongside them, I salute the citizens of another country right on the front line of that fight today, the brave people of Ukraine. The United Kingdom has given their military support worth £2.3 billion since the start of Putin's invasion, the second highest contribution in the world after the United States,
Here we go.
which demonstrates that our commitment to democracy and open societies remains steadfast. In that context, the Prime Minister and I both
there's
recognise
some
the need to
background
increase
deals for
defence spending.
when this war's over.
But before we make that
Guys getting out
commitment,
of it.
it's necessary to revise and update the integrated
I'm not a
review
big player in this,
written as
so
it was before the Ukraine invasion.
I think being
And I've asked
very,
for that vital work to be completed ahead of the next
I think
budget,
we should
and
do
to
or
today confirm we will
getting more
continue
most
to
of that.
maintain the defence budget at
basis.
least 2%
But yeah,
of
it's an
GDP
interesting
to be
one.
consistent with our NATO commitment.
But look, I think
Another important
just summarising,
international commitment is overseas aid.
From a property
The
perspective,
OBR's
actually, this is a
forecasts
non-event.
show a significant shock to
You've got the
public
capital gains.
finances,
So if you're looking to
so
sell,
it won't be possible
obviously
to
it's going
return
to
to
be
the
more tax, which means less money
0.7%
coming
target
you.
until the fiscal
so you're gonna look
situation
at that.
allows. We
the
remain
tax-free
fully
threshold, if
committed
you're at
to
the higher
that
end,
target,
above
and the plans
the
that I've set out today
5,000
assume that
pounds
ODA
a year
spending
mark,
will remain
then you're
around
gonna be paying, you jump
0.5%
into
for
the
the
45,
forecast
so
period.
you go from 40
As a
to
percentage
45.
of GNI, we were the third highest
That,
donor in the
besides
G7
that,
last
stamp
year,
duties
and I am
still
proud
there.
our aid
The
commitment has
cuts
saved
still there, which is
thousands
good
of
news.
lives around
That's
the
still
world.
there. What I'm
So
disappointed
I look forward to working closely with my right
and I
honourable friend, the
hope
member for
this is
Sutton
what they'll
Coldfield,
do, and normally
now
it'll take
rightly
about
back in his
6
place in
months a
cabinet,
year, so I
to make
reckon by
sure we
this time
continue
next
to
year,
play a
you
leadership
should
role
see him
in
standing
tackling
there if it's
global
about.
poverty.
And
the United Kingdom has also been a global leader on climate change,
and getting in there
cutting
and getting
emissions
new
by
build.
more than any
Stimulate
other
new build,
G20
we kick the
country.
market off because new
But
build
with the
employs
existential
plumbers
vulnerability
and
we
bricklayers
face,
and all these
now
sort
would
of
be the
people.
wrong time
And then that
to step
filters
back
through the
from our
economy. So it's a
international
great way to
climate
get the money in.
responsibilities.
Far
So I
better than
also
giving some
confirm
billionaire
that
or
despite
some
the economic pressures,
large corporation,
we remain
better
fully
to
committed
spend it
to the
on
historic
properties.
Glasgow
That
Climate
then
Pact
hits the
agreed
economy
at
really, really well.
COP26,
And it's
including a
supercharges the economy. And it's one of
68%
the reasons why I
reduction in our
love
own
new
emissions
build
by
properties
2030.
because of that element. Certainly coming out of a recession.
I turn to education.
This is my second one here.
Mr. Speaker, being pro-education
and then,
is
if we go
being
back in
pro-growth.
I've been through one.
But
That's
providing
how
our children with a good education is not just an economic
shit,
mission,
if you like.
it's a moral mission, one to which my right honourable friend the Prime Minister has always been deeply committed. Thanks to the efforts of successive Conservative education secretaries, particularly my right honourable friends from Surrey Heath and from Bognor Regis, we have risen 9 places in the global league tables for maths and reading in the last 7 years. I still, however, have concerns that not all school leavers get the skills they need for a modern economy.
So I think the US, the UK...
But for the first time ever, this country has a Conservative education secretary who left school at 16 to become an apprentice and knows firsthand why good skills matter. There are many important initiatives in place, but as Chancellor, I want to know the answer to one simple question. Will every young person leave the education system with the skills they would get in Japan, Germany or Switzerland? So I've appointed Sir Michael Barber to advise me and my right honourable friend, the Education Secretary, on the implementation of our skills reform programme. As we raise the skill levels of our school leaders,
they got rid of things like
I want also to ensure that even in an economic crisis, the improvement in school standards continues to accelerate.
Is school fit for purpose?
Some have suggested putting VAT on independent school
out of
fees
school right now
as a way of increasing core funding for schools, which would raise about £1.7 billion. But according to certain estimates, that would result in up to 90,000 children from the independent sector switching to state schools, giving with one hand only to take away with another.
And it's a fantastic system, and for us, it's great to get involved.
So instead of being ideological, I'm going to be practical. Because we want school standards to continue to rise for every single child, we're going to do more than protect the school's budget, we're going to increase it. And I can announce today that next year and the year after, we will invest an extra £2.3 billion per annum in our schools. Our message to heads and teachers and classroom assistants is thank you for your brilliant work. We need it to continue, and in difficult economic circumstances, a Conservative government is investing more in the public service that defines all our futures.
It's a good autumn statement for property investors.
Mr. Speaker, the service we depend on more than any other is the NHS.
Capital gains is probably the
As a former health secretary, I know how hard people are working on the front line and how much they're struggling after the pandemic.
Him for the rest of it.
The biggest issues are workforce shortages
really don't see
and pressures in the social care sector. So today I address
still there. A budget like this is not
on staff shortages.
There's still a lot of things.
The former chair of the Health and Social Care Select
a lot of the tech companies
put forward a case for a long-term workforce plan. He even wrote a book about it, which I've read.
Those people have to go and find jobs.
I've listened carefully to his proposals.
I
believe they have merits. So the Department of Health and Social Care and the NHS will publish an independently verified plan for the number of doctors, nurses, and other professionals we'll need in 5, 10 and 15 years' time, taking full account of the need for better retention and productivity improvement.
And creating profit opportunity for you.
I've also listened to extensive representations about the challenges facing the social care sector.
To get out of recession,
it did a
really
heroic
then
job
get the boom at the other end.
Children,
Make no mistake,
disabled adults,
once
and older people
comes out of this,
during the pandemic.
we have the next boom. So in some ways, as much as it's sitting there going, oh,
employees
terrible,
work incredibly hard.
Actually, what happens
even
is
outside the pandemic, the
inflation drives
increasing
up
number of
prices
over 80s
and wages,
massive pressure on their
then we get
services.
inflation in check, the wages
I
stay
also
up.
heard very real
House
concerns
prices
from
which
local
either
authorities,
stay down, drop maybe a little bit,
particularly
whatever.
about their
Then they're
ability
free
to
to
deliver
drive
the
up
DILNOT
again
reforms
because the
immediately.
affordability is back in check, and when that
So I
affordability
will
comes back,
delay the
and then
implementation of
banks
this
who
important
have
reform
constricted
for
lending
2
now,
years,
all of a sudden
allocating
open
the
it up.
funding to allow
Now
local
we're sitting there,
authorities to provide more care
and you know
packages.
the whole market goes boom.
I also want
and
the social
so
care system
if you're sitting there
to help
wondering
free
whether
up
you should
some of
hold
the
your property or whether you should sell
13,500
it,
hospital beds
well, if you
that
can
are
hold it
occupied by
through
those
this
who
next
should be at
18
home.
months,
So I've decided to allocate
that's
for
good
adult
news.
social care
Now,
additional
look, it
grant
might be
funding
12
of
months.
£1 billion
It could be a
next year
V,
and
or
£1.7 billion
be
the
careful
year
of this
after.
because inflation's still high. You're still going to get it in check.
Combined with
And if
savings from the
if we
delayed
raise
DILNOT
interest rates
reforms
too hard,
and more
we could
council tax
take the economy.
flexibility,
This is where we talk about
this
inflation.
means an increase in
If we
funding
kill off all the
available for
demand,
the social care
get
sector of
deflation,
up to
which is
£2.8 billion
prices going
next
down,
year and £4.7
stimulus,
billion
government,
the year after. That's a big increase.
economic growth.
But how we look
Also,
after our most
doing
vulnerable citizens is not just a
The
practical
reality is,
issue. It speaks to
I
our
don't think we're
values
there
as a
yet. And I
society.
hope we're not.
So
And I hope we've got
today's
enough stability in
decision
government now
will allow the social care
actually
system
get
to
through
deliver
this.
an estimated
Let's see, but not
200,000
a big
more
one
care
for
packages over the
austerity.
next 2
I'd much
years,
prefer
the
me
biggest
personally,
increase
I'd
in
much
funding
prefer
under any government
have,
of any colour in history.
During this time, and the sooner
The
we get that
NHS
stimulus
budget
happening,
has been increased
okay,
to record
then the
levels
sooner we
to
come
deal
out
with
the
the
other
pandemic.
side. All right.
And today I'm asking the NHS to join
is
all
if you've got
public
inflation
services
and you
in tackling
stimulate,
waste
you get
and
more inflation.
inefficiency.
So effectively what
We
they're saying
want
is, let's kill off the
Scandinavian
inflation
quality
once we've got that under
alongside
control.
Singaporean efficiency.
we can
Both
go
better outcomes for citizens and better value for
What was
taxpayers.
that? I just said Singapore.
That does not mean
Interesting.
asking
What that
people
said.
on the front line, often exhausted and burned out, to work harder, which would not be possible or fair. But it does mean asking challenging questions about how to reform all our public services for the better. So with respect to the NHS, I've asked former Health Secretary and Chair of the Norfolk and Waveney Integrated Care System, Patricia Hewitt, to help me and the Health Secretary achieve
Been around
that
for a while.
by advising us on how to make sure the new integrated care boards, the local NHS bodies,
Look, I love the NHS.
operate
And I think
operate
it should do
efficiently
the dignity
and with
of-
appropriate
it should
autonomy
be
and
a
accountability.
human right. Okay?
I've also had
But I think
discussions
the problem
with
is
NHS
last
England
austerity after the global
about the
financial crisis,
inflationary pressures on their
everything was cut to
budgets.
the bone.
I
The problem
recognise
is,
that
you cut something to
efficiency
the bone,
savings alone
you
will
don't
not
really
be enough to
increase
deliver the
spending
services
very
we all need.
much.
So because
No,
of difficult
that's a
decisions
real
taken elsewhere
challenge.
today, I will
And now I can
increase
show
the
you, if
NHS
you have
budget
it
in
here,
each of the next 2 years
see if
by
I can show
£3.3 billion. The Chief Executive of the NHS, Amanda Pritchard, has said that this should provide sufficient funding for the NHS to fulfil its key priorities. She said it shows the government is serious about its commitment to prioritise our NHS. £3.3 billion for the NHS, £4.7 billion for social care, a record £8 billion
So if we have a look here,
for our health and care system.
you can see basically
That is a
where people
Conservative
have-
government
where money
putting
is
the
spent.
NHS
So this is
first.
actually austerity 2.0, all right? And if we have a look here,
Mr.
we've got
Speaker,
healthcare. You can see
the NHS
has driven,
and schools in
Home
Scotland,
Office,
the NHS and schools in Scotland,
education
Wales
dropped,
and Northern Ireland face
dropped,
equivalent pressures.
HMRC,
So the Barnett
Treasury
consequentials
dropped.
of today's
You see
decisions
foreign officers,
mean an extra
all right, then dropped.
£1.5
Law
billion
Office
for the
departments,
Scottish government,
the
£1.2 billion for
Justice
the Welsh
Department,
government,
obviously,
£650 million
evictions,
for the
and
Northern
these
Ireland
are
executive.
terrible.
That is more
Culture,
resources
yeah,
for the schools and
transport,
hospitals in our
worse
devolved
pensions,
nations
community
next year,
housing,
the year
housing,
after, and every year
tax.
thereafter.
So really, it's only Home Office and
Mr. Speaker,
health and social care
our support
that has
for
risen.
public
So,
services
we're saying 26%.
means that despite needing to
But
find
take into account
£55 billion
inflation
in
of
savings
that,
and tax
you know,
rises,
what's
we are
the actual
protecting the
outcome
amount going into
So
public
that's an
services
interesting,
in
you know,
real terms
this is
over the 5-year
austerity,
period.
all right?
But if we're going to
we're
sustain
looking-
our public
so, yes.
services and avoid a doom
It's going to be interesting to
of
see
ever higher
how
taxes
this
and
austerity
ever lower
how it
dynamism,
turns
we
out
need
now.
economic growth.
But look,
So I now turn I now turn, well, they've never been interested in growth, but we on this side of the House
They are the most rowdy
I
lot.
want to get to the end of the budget statement like the rest of the people of this country.
There's the speaker going on.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So let's start with a difficult message for the party opposite. You cannot borrow your way to growth. Sound money.
I've just been told I need to be a little bit louder.
Sound money is the rock upon which long-term prosperity rests.
Hopefully that's
but
sorted
it isn't
now.
enough on its own. Our plan is designed to build a high-wage, high-skill economy that leads to long-term prosperity.
I do love these sort of keywords, buzzwords, and that sort of stuff. I don't find that they really work very well, you know. Because there's plenty of buzzwords, but then what happens is when you follow up and see what they actually achieved, that's where the disappointment comes.
Infrastructure and innovation.
Yeah.
Cheap, low-carbon, reliable energy must sit at the heart of any
Let's see how they do this.
But Putin's weaponization of international gas prices has helped drive the cost of our national energy consumption right up. This year we'll be spending an extra £150 billion on energy compared to pre-pandemic levels, equivalent to paying for an entire second NHS through our energy bills.
Imagine if they didn't have to put all that profit into French company and people own all that energy.
It will both bankrupt our economy and harm our planet. Over the long term, there's only one way to stop ourselves being at the mercy of international gas prices: energy independence combined with energy efficiency.
Yeah, okay.
Energy independence, so neither Putin nor anyone else can use energy to blackmail us, and energy efficiency to reduce demand and climate impact as much as possible.
So this is where EPCs are coming into their own to some degree. Most people don't really know what that EPC, Energy Performance Certificate, means. But, to be fair, it does mean that you're getting more efficient things. And this is where new build property is actually starting to perform well. And even some of the funders, as we talked about last night on the live stream, are giving discounts or higher loan to values.
Technologies like offshore wind, carbon capture and storage, and above all, nuclear.
So if you didn't hear, yes, UK is in recession. They just announced it before.
This will deliver new jobs, industries,
which we kind of knew that anyway. We had a quarter already, we've got a second quarter, which will end, but we can already see that's
zero. So today I can announce
I'm being told my mic is a bit low.
With a new nuclear power plant at Sizewell.
Hopefully that's fixed now. Guys, you just want to write in and tell me if you can hear me. I've got I love my watch coming out at the messages. The guys are going, can't hear me very well. But hopefully you can now. Hopefully that's better. So yeah. But look, I mean, I'm just talking now for the sake of it, because most of the stuff for property investors is gone now. It's a pretty boring statement, to be fair. I thought there would be a little bit more cut, but I think actually now the reality is that it's not too bad. I've been told that it's all good now, which is great. So yeah, look, just a summary for you guys that have just joined. We've got the threshold for tax. If you're earning 150 before, now the 45% starts at 125, 140. So 125,000, 140 pounds. You go to the 45% above that. Not a big, huge difference. It's not going to make that much of a difference for someone earning that. You've got the tax-free allowance, which is coming down. You've got the capital gains tax, which is also the tax-free allowance is coming down over the next. So it'll be 12,300. Halve that to 6,000, or a little bit more, and then 3,000 a year after that. So, that has a reasonable effect, because remember, you're going to be at probably 45% or 40%, depending on where you're at, will be your capital gains on that. So yeah, so that can make a big difference. If you're paying an extra, say $6,000, 40% $6,000, or 40% of $9,000, yeah, makes a difference. Yeah. But look, guys, apart from that, I think the key here and the good positive news right now is rents are being driven up. Okay, so we're driving rents up. I know it's terrible for tenants, and really what that's going to mean is if your income is fixed, you're going to have to move, either put a bigger proportion into your rent or move to a lower quality, further out area, a smaller property, whatever. That's just the reality. That's not about landlords being the assholes. That's not about profiteering. That is the reality of the situation. Because let's face it, landlords who are also on a fixed income, unless you're getting more rent, with the increases, you're going to be stuffed, So somehow, you can't, you've got to find some money from somewhere, and rents are up because obviously inflation, I mean, every year things like insurance are going up, all that sort of stuff. So we've got to be really, on top of that.
So today I can announce that I'm not cutting a penny from our capital budgets in the next 2 years and maintaining them at that level in capital.
So they're spending on stuff on capital. Which capital works is important. When we talk about stimulating the economy and going into new build, one of the key things to do is spend money on capital projects. That's the time to fix roads in a recession, because that keeps the wheels turning, that keeps money getting into the economy and circulating through, which is really important. Okay, so that's important. What else has he got to say? I'm just looking down the bottom here. Normally we get the this updated, but for whatever reason it's not.
Because of this decision, alongside Sizewell C, we will deliver the core Northern Powerhouse Rail, HS2 to Manchester, and East-West Rail, and the new hospitals programme, and gigabit broadband rollout. All these.
So this is pretty good. I mean, look, high-speed rail blown out massively, but that's what you expect. And unfortunately, it shouldn't be that way, but that happens every capital expenditure. But the hospitals, all this sort of stuff, great. But hospitals are no good if you don't have the nurses and doctors in there. Schools are no good if you don't have the teachers. And let's face it, with a lot of the other things going on, the woke culture, all those sort of things, it's driving people out, of those industries. So, let's see how they deal with that. It's all great to have a new hospital, but if you've got no one to work there.
And funding a trade and investment event in Northern Ireland next year. But to unlock growth, right across the country, we need to make it easier for local leaders to make things happen.
I agree. I think localisation is a good thing for certain things. But you know what? Things like selective licenses is a friggin' ridiculousness. I mean, sometimes regulation gets taken too far and taken the wrong way. But yeah.
And deals to bring mayors to Cornwall, Norfolk.
So guys, look, we're at the tail end of this now. I don't know how long he's going to talk for now. There's really nothing that's coming out about property right now that I can see, on any of the feeds. And I guess, to be fair, as a property investor, just to sort of summarise, because let's face it, I don't want to take any more of your time, I actually think that it's been yeah, dull and boring. I mean, yes, if you're selling a property, you're going to pay more capital gains tax. So, yeah, I mean, but I think overall, yeah, okay. This is one of my challenges, and I sort of alluded to this before, but this is one of the things my gut feel is they've been talking about this 52, 55 billion pound hole. I wonder if it is a real hole or whether it's been whipped up into a storm because they can, and now they're coming in to resolve it. It's almost like, let's create a shitstorm and then let's fix it, even though there was no shitstorm there. So, it's an interesting thing where I wonder how much of this gap is real, Because let's face it, we weren't talking about this before. Liz Truss wasn't talking about this. Nobody was talking about it. Liz Truss, I think she was the sheep that got led to the slaughter. I think actually she went with her lobbyist mates and Kwasi went there too. They said, let's do this. Those guys set them up. They walked in hook, line and sinker, and basically they made, I imagine, billions shorting the pound, shorting the market, shorting that, and then what do? Then they said, pointed the finger at them. They're to blame, they're to blame, they're to blame. And then what do? They installed their billionaire mate in Rishi. Let's see. Let's see what happens in the next 2 years, 3 years. What is it, 3 years until the election? So yeah, cheers. So Skaz. I don't know how to pronounce your name, but yeah, welcome back again tonight. But look, I think, so far it's pretty boring for property investors. The one good thing I think about this is that we're not talking about a depression. We're not talking about a 4-year recession. Nobody's talking about double dipping now. Most countries and most people are talking about that they can get it under control. And I think the key here is that as long as they don't let inflation go on for too long, go too high, that they need to raise so high that it just kills off all demand, then we could be in a totally different situation. And that could change, relatively quickly. At this stage, I'm not seeing that. Yes, our inflation is going up, but this is the thing. If you look at the US inflation has actually decreased now, has started to come down. So the pressure on their interest rates has come down. And that's not because they're doing better than us. That's because they've gone into summer, whereas we've gone into winter. So now, because the energy has gone up so much, that's what's causing a lot of inflation. Well, what happens in March next year? Well, okay, could be April, could be May, could be June, when it starts to get warmer, but we're talking, let's talk spring. So April next year, when it starts to get warmer, significantly warmer, then we start turning our heaters off. Well, then you're going to see, I think, inflation come down. So as much as they predicted inflation to drop quite dramatically in June, I think we may actually see it more in probably April. So interest rates wise, we potentially will see more increases through to March, maybe February. Well, it all depends on how much we go out and spend for Christmas, how much we spend. So let's see how we go. But I think this is... it's a recession, so a recession is never good. I think the key here is to look at your own self and look and see whether you can afford to lose your job. We talk about these. We talk about running scenarios, and one of the scenarios we talk about is what happens if you lose your job. Yeah. What happens if you lose your job, but you can't get another job for 3 months, and when you do get the next job, it's at 70% of what you're earning? Can you survive? And if you can survive, that's a really what I call realistic worst case. And I think when you play realistic worst case with these sort of things, it gives you the confidence that even if you lose your job, you're okay. Yeah. So that's one of the things. The other thing is, what happens if house price? The worst prediction that I've seen is house prices dropping 30%. The reality is most experts now are talking 5 to 10, and in fact that's in areas that really aren't the best fundamentals. 5 is probably London, so, and I think we'll see London boom. So I think the reality is if you can see that even if house prices drop, if you can hold it, then you're fine. And we talk about mortgage cost averaging at 6%. If you mortgage cost average, in other words, you act as if your mortgage is 6% throughout the whole level of ownership. So some of the times you're going to be less than that. Some of the times it's going to be more than that. When it's less, you put some money away. When it's more, you use the money that you've put away as a provision. Then actually you don't have to worry about things like that. Now, if you've got a great income, your job's secure, you're in a market that's actually doing really well, then fantastic. You probably don't need to worry about that as much. But, we've had interest rates very low for a while, and I think the key here is to actually, if you haven't done it already, I've been saying this for weeks now. In fact, I've been saying this for months. Sit down, get your numbers right, do a portfolio review, and just make sure you can survive through the worst of it. I think the worst of it is going to be between now and probably,
that March, April time before things will start to settle down. So that may mean people losing their jobs, so you may be made redundant. That may mean that interest rates are going to go up. That may mean that your cost of obviously eating and that sort of stuff is going to go up. So play with those numbers now. Don't be an emu, stick your head in the sand, all right? Because the problem with sticking your head in the sand is that you end up getting a kick up the arse, yeah? So just don't do it. Work your numbers now, know your numbers, and if the numbers don't work now or what you're predicting, then make some decisions now, make some changes now. If you have to sell and you have to jettison off some of your portfolio or you've got to do something, then you've just got to do that. Yeah, you've got to make that decision. The sooner you make it, the better it is. The other thing is you can sit there and stress and worrying about what might happen, or you can do the numbers and see what's actually or what could happen and have the numbers in front of you. You can manage, what you measure, you can manage. What you manage, you measure. Yeah, you know what I mean. You can't manage what you haven't measured, all right? So get there and measure it, work out where you're at, and that way you can come up with strategies and measure it. And of course, if you need help with that, then send us an email, support@gladfish.com. And, we're more than happy to talk you through options and, scenarios and those sort of things. Yeah. I think there's actually a blog article that I've got which actually calculates this stuff. It's a downloadable spreadsheet. You put your figures in and you work out where you're at. Or we've got the 2-year cash flow worksheet. You can work out all your numbers and see where you're at. You can also, increase the interest rates and see what they'll be. All sorts of things like that. These tools are out there, so use them to give you certainty. Yeah.
So today I can announce that this government will cap the increase in social rents to a maximum of 7%.
Yeah, so he's still talking stuff that I don't think has anything to do with this. I mean, if I've missed a few things while I've been talking, then fine, we'll pick them up later. But to be fair, the big stuff is always at the start.
This government,
I mean, really, this is the kind of sales pitch.
they cared about the most vulnerable.
But look, it's austerity to a degree. It doesn't sound, and this is why I say I don't think the $55 billion gap is actually a pound gap. Is a reality. I think it's a shitstorm they created so they can resolve it, so they look good. And the reason I think that is because a lot of these things they're talking about, for me, it's not really, it doesn't feel like austerity. Not like it was 10, 12 years ago, 14 years ago, when it was kind of like, oh, this is austerity. They're cutting and cutting deep, and there's no end date for that. And we had it for 10 years. And then not only that, then we bloody went into Brexit, then we had tax changes, then we had the COVID, and then, in between all there, we had 5 different prime ministers, 4 different prime ministers. I've lost count. We've had 12 different housing ministers. Just how can you get anything done right if you can't keep, a person in a position? But look, guys, I think that's pretty much it. There's no new news coming out. It's all pretty much the same. So actually, if anything, this autumn statement, property investors, we dodged a bullet. It's only really if you're selling you're going to be affected hugely, or if you're earning, over that 125,000 mark, you're going to pay more. And really, it's the 150 mark, people, because if you're only 125, you're still the same. Yeah. So that's quite good. Yeah, okay. Look, guys, I think I can keep talking all night, which I often do, but I think I'm going to cut it there just because we've been going for a few minutes, and I think actually it's probably time to end it. Yeah, so I think thanks for joining us. And I think it's a good outcome for property investors. Nothing really too bad there. If anything, it's good news with their predictions about the recession that we are in already. Okay, so you might as well say it's official now, even though really it probably needs to be the end of the quarter before it's official. But acknowledging it now, I think, is the right thing to do. The sooner you acknowledge the issue, the sooner you can address it. And I think this does address it. So yeah, we'll track it and see how things plan out. But actually, I'm feeling a lot better actually, because there's always, and in my position where I'm talking about economics and politics and all that sort of stuff, it's very easy to become really negative, become really positive, or even sometimes you're sitting there going, I think this is what's going to happen, but this could also happen and this could also happen. It could be really, really bad or it could be really, really good. And I think, to be fair, I was in two thoughts. I've turned him off anyway. I was in two minds. One mind was this could be really bad, and if this is really bad, this could be horrible, or it could be okay, not much difference. I didn't think it was going to be fantastic for us. I didn't think that for a second. But actually, to be fair, what's come out of this is that it's actually been on the better side of it than the worst. It's certainly not the bad side. So I'm feeling pretty good now. And I think as property investors, we've dodged a bullet. And I think, to be fair, things were looking pretty good. And I think our property values in good areas with good fundamentals are going to be quite good. And when I say quite good, they're not going to drop off too much. I think if you're in shitty areas over time, they're not going to change. They're still shitty areas, and they're going to be shitty areas. And the fundamentals, the investment, the regeneration, none of that's going to be there. So if you invest in those areas, you're probably going to get the capital growth. The income, but you're not going to get the capital growth anymore. I remember when I first started property. For my first 20 years in property, it was property doubles every 7 to 10 years. It's the biggest assumption, but it was an assumption that everybody talked about. That isn't the case anymore. And I don't believe that anymore at all, ever. And I think the reason I don't is because, yes, it applies in certain areas like London, Manchester, Birmingham, and some of these areas that are getting huge amounts of investment. But a lot of other areas, are crap, and they're just going to be, into the ground, if you like. They'll still exist, but with aging population and all those sort of demographics and that, So it looks like, he's getting a big pat on the back there. Don't know what that's about.
The Prime Minister and his colleague in the Treasury. It's now time to hear Rachel Reeves for Labour, the Shadow Chancellor.
You know what?
Thank you, Mr.
We'll stay on for 5 minutes.
Thank you to the Chancellor for that statement. So here we are, the end of 2022. 3 Prime Ministers, 4 Chancellors, and 4 budgets later. And where do we find ourselves? In a worse place than we started the year. Inflation spiralling, growth plunging, living standards falling. Mr. Speaker, Britain is a great country with fantastic strengths.
You know what?
But because of this government's mistakes, we are being held back. What people will be asking themselves...
I agree with this, guys. I think we are being held back by this government. But I don't think Labor would have done any better. I think there's a fundamental problem with the system. And I think for me, that's the real issue here. Is it's not about Labor or Conservatives. It's not about, whatever. There's a fundamental problem with the system, and that is the system no longer, democracy, as we all grew up believing in, no longer exists. What there is a ruling elite. They're not interested in the people, really. They're interested in staying in power. Look, maybe after 20, 30 years of, 30 years of doing economics, and I've just become jilted with it. Maybe that's just the way it is, and maybe I'm seeing, look, I think there's so many fantastic things happening in life, but when you look at politics, that's not one of them, so look, I was going to listen to her, but to be fair, utterly uninspiring and inconsequential. So I think they're just going to respond and be negative and, shout and jeer and that sort of thing. So, but anyway, guys, I know I should give equal Labor and Liberal, Labor and Conservatives, but you know what? No, can't be bothered. I've got better things to do. I'm going to go get some, go grab a coffee and get back to work. But guys, so thanks for joining us, and we'll see you again on the next. So actually, if you want to join the live stream every Wednesday, 12:30 across my YouTube channels, Facebooks, and all the social media, or you can just go to Gladfish /dashboard. You will have to be signed in though to get the live stream, and we have sort of other stuff that I add on there too. So that's probably the best place to look at it. All right, guys, thank you very much, and we'll see you next week. Bye.